Victoria stared at the phone screen, her hands trembling as she read the message that would shatter her world. Can't wait to sign the papers tomorrow. Once V is out, the company will be ours. She built it, but she'll never see it coming. The text was from her husband of 15 years, Robert, to someone named Natasha. Victoria's heart pounded as she scrolled through months of messages between them, each one more devastating than the last. She's so focused on the business, she doesn't even notice I'm gone half the time, Robert had written just last week. Perfect for us. By Christmas, Torres Construction will be Natasha's, and Victoria will be history. Victoria sat in her car outside the construction site she had designed from the ground up. The building that would soon house 50 new families stood before her, a testament to her vision and hard work. But now, reading these messages on Robert's phone that he'd left charging in their shared office, she realized her husband had been planning to steal everything from her. The affair was bad enough. The messages revealed intimate details of their relationship, plans for romantic getaways and promises of a future together. But what made Victoria's blood run cold was the calculated way Robert discussed removing her from the company she had built with her own hands. The company that bore her maiden name, Torres Construction, was her life's work. She had started it in their garage 15 years ago with nothing but determination and a business degree. Victoria is too trusting, another message read. She signed those papers I told her were insurance forms. She has no idea they were actually transfer documents. Once my lawyer processes them, she'll own nothing. Victoria's mind raced back to last month when Robert had casually asked her to sign some papers while she was rushing to a client meeting. He'd said they were routine insurance updates for their business. She had trusted him completely, signing without reading. Now she understood the truth. Her husband had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe years. The worst part wasn't just the cheating or the theft. It was the way Robert had written about her, as if she were just an obstacle to remove. Victoria thinks she's so smart with her business degree and her big plans, he had texted. But she's just a woman who got lucky. Natasha understands construction better than Victoria ever will. This was the man who had promised to love and cherish her. The man who had stood by her side when she pitched their first major project to investors. The man who had held her when she cried after losing their baby 5 years ago, when she had thrown herself into work to cope with the grief. Now he was casually discussing erasing her from the company that had become her entire identity. Victoria looked at the latest message sent just hours ago. Pack light for our trip to Hawaii. Once the paperwork is finalized, we'll celebrate while Victoria figures out what hit her. She'll probably try to fight it, but I've made sure she has no legal ground to stand on. The phone buzzed with a new message. Victoria watched in horror as Robert typed, I almost feel bad for her. She really thinks I love her. But business is business, and Natasha is everything Victoria isn't. Young, beautiful, and she actually understands what I need. Victoria's hands shook as she took screenshots of every message. 15 years of marriage, and this was how it ended. Not with a conversation or even a fight, but with a calculated plan to destroy her life while she remained completely unaware. She thought about all the late nights she had spent working on projects while Robert claimed he was networking. All the times he had encouraged her to focus on the business while he handled the legal side. All the moments when she had felt grateful to have such a supportive husband who understood her dreams. The construction site around her buzzed with activity. Her workers were putting the finishing touches on the project that would net Torres Construction its biggest profit yet. These were the same workers who had been with her for years, who respected her vision and trusted her leadership. They had no idea that their boss was about to lose everything. Victoria's phone rang, startling her. It was Robert calling his own phone. She declined the call and quickly put the phone back exactly where she had found it. She walked to her car with careful, measured steps, her mind already working on a plan. As she drove home, Victoria's initial shock began to transform into something else. She had built Torres Construction from nothing. She had sacrificed her social life, her hobbies, and even her dreams of having children to make it successful. Every project they completed, every client they satisfied, every worker they employed was because of her vision and determination. Robert thought he could steal her life's work and walk away with his mistress. He thought she would crumble when she discovered the truth. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. Victoria pulled into their driveway and looked at the house they had bought together 5 years ago. The house she had furnished and decorated while Robert was busy with his secret affair. The house where she had planned to grow old with the man she loved. That version of Victoria was gone. The woman who walked into that house was someone new. Someone who had been betrayed in the worst possible way but who wasn't going to go down without a fight. As she opened the front door, Victoria heard Robert in his office. probably worried about his missing phone. She walked past his door without saying a word, her mind already 3 steps ahead of his deception. Robert Torres thought he had won. He had no idea that the game was just beginning. Victoria spent the next 3 days acting completely normal while her world crumbled around her. She made breakfast for Robert each morning, kissed him goodbye and watched him leave for work, knowing he was probably meeting Natasha. Every smile felt like poison, every casual conversation like a knife to her heart. But Victoria was nothing if not strategic. She had built a multimillion-dollar construction company by being smart, patient, and thorough. Now she would use those same skills to uncover the full extent of Robert's betrayal. On Thursday morning, Victoria told Robert she was visiting potential job sites. Instead, she drove to their company's main office and accessed their shared computer system. What she found there made her realize the affair was just the beginning of Robert's deception. For the past 8 months, Robert had been systematically changing company documents. He had quietly altered contracts to list himself as the primary owner. He had moved money from their joint business accounts into accounts that only he controlled. Most shocking of all, he had been meeting with lawyers to explore ways to force Victoria out of the company entirely. Victoria found email exchanges between Robert and a law firm she had never heard of. The emails discussed strategies for removing the co-founder and establishing clear ownership hierarchy. One email from Robert's lawyer laid out a plan that made Victoria's blood run cold. Given that Mrs. Torres has been so focused on the operational side of the business, she may not have been paying attention to the legal changes. If we can establish that she was merely an employee rather than an owner, the transition will be much smoother. But the most devastating discovery came when Victoria found Robert's personal email accounts still logged in on their shared computer. The emails with Natasha went back 2 years, not the few months Victoria had initially thought. 2 years of planning, scheming, and laughing about how naive Victoria was. "She's working on the Riverside project again tonight," Robert had written to Natasha 6 months ago. "She's so obsessed with making it perfect, she doesn't even notice I'm gone 3 nights a week. Sometimes I think she loves that company more than she loves me." Natasha's response had been cruel. "Well, soon she won't have either. I can't wait to redecorate the office. Her taste is so boring." Victoria learned that Natasha wasn't just Robert's mistress. She was also a recent business school graduate who had been feeding Robert ideas about modernizing the company. Many of the changes Robert had suggested over the past year, changes Victoria had dismissed as unnecessary, had actually come from Natasha. The emails revealed that Robert had been paying Natasha as a consultant for Torres Construction, using company money to fund their affair. He had been flying her to conferences, putting her up in expensive hotels, and buying her gifts, all while telling Victoria they needed to cut costs. Victoria found receipts for jewelry, expensive dinners, and weekend getaways that Robert had claimed were business expenses. She found hotel bills for romantic trips that Robert had told her were solo networking events. She found evidence of a lifestyle Robert had been living behind her back, funded by the company she had built. But the most painful discovery was a document titled, "New Business Plan for Torres Construction." It was a detailed proposal for restructuring the company once Victoria was removed. The plan included firing longtime employees who were loyal to Victoria, selling off projects that Victoria had personally developed, and rebranding the company entirely. "Victoria's approach is too conservative," the document read. "She's too attached to her workers and too focused on quality over profit. Once she's out, we can streamline operations and increase margins by at least 30%. The document talked about Victoria as if she were an obstacle to overcome rather than the person who had created everything Robert was trying to steal. It described her dedication to her workers as weakness and her commitment to quality as inefficiency. Victoria sat in her car in the parking lot of their office building, staring at the printouts of all the evidence she had gathered. Her husband hadn't just been cheating on her. He had been systematically destroying her life while she remained completely unaware. She thought about all the times over the past year when Robert had suggested changes to their business structure. All the times he had asked her to sign documents without reading them carefully. All the times he had encouraged her to focus on the creative side while he handled the boring legal stuff. Victoria realized that Robert had been planning this betrayal for at least 2 years. Every kind gesture, every supportive comment, every moment of intimacy had been part of his plan to keep her distracted while he stole her life's work. The worst part was how stupid she felt. Victoria had built a successful business by being smart and careful, but in her personal life she had been completely blind. She had trusted Robert completely, and he had used that trust to destroy her. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. She knew he was probably meeting Natasha, maybe even celebrating how close they were to their goal. As Victoria drove home, she thought about the woman she had been just a week ago. That woman had believed in love, trust, and partnership. That woman had thought she was building a life with her husband. That woman was gone forever. The woman driving home now was someone different. Someone who had been betrayed in the worst possible way but who wasn't going to let that betrayal define her. Someone who had built an empire once and could do it again. Victoria pulled into her driveway and looked at the house she had called home for 5 years. Tomorrow she would start building her counterattack. Robert thought he had won, but he had no idea what Victoria Torres was capable of when she stopped playing nice. She walked into her house and poured herself a glass of wine. Then she sat down at her kitchen table and began to plan her revenge. Victoria woke up the next morning with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. The initial shock and pain of discovery had crystallized into something much more powerful: determination. She had spent 15 years building Torres Construction into a respected name in the industry. She wasn't going to let Robert destroy that legacy without a fight. While Robert showered, Victoria made a decision that would change everything. She called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years, telling Robert she had a migraine. He barely looked up from his phone as he left for the office, probably eager to spend the day with Natasha. Victoria's first stop was the office of Patricia Chin, a forensic accountant she had met at a business conference 2 years ago. Patricia specialized in uncovering financial fraud in small businesses, and Victoria had a feeling she was going to need that expertise. "I need to know everything about my company's finances," Victoria told Patricia after explaining her situation. "Every account, every transfer, every expense. I think my husband has been stealing from me, but I need proof." Patricia was thorough and professional. She asked Victoria to sign authorization forms allowing her to access all of Torres Construction's financial records. "This will take about a week," Patricia explained. "But if there's financial misconduct, I'll find it." Victoria's next stop was the office of James Rodriguez, a divorce attorney who had been recommended by a friend. James was known for handling complex business divorces, and Victoria knew she would need someone who understood both personal and commercial law. "I need to protect my business," Victoria told James after showing him copies of the evidence she had gathered. "My husband has been planning this for at least 2 years. He's been altering documents, moving money, and plotting with his mistress to steal everything I've built." James reviewed the screenshots and documents Victoria had brought. His expression grew more serious with each page. "This is worse than just an affair," he said finally. "This looks like systematic financial fraud. We need to act quickly to protect your interests." James explained that Victoria's first priority was to secure her legal position. He would immediately file for divorce and request temporary orders to prevent Robert from making any major changes to the business. He would also petition the court to freeze certain assets until the divorce was finalized. "The good news is that you have evidence of his planning," James said. "Courts don't look kindly on spouses who try to hide assets during divorce proceedings. The bad news is that he's had a head start. We need to move fast." Victoria's third stop was the hardest. She drove to the office of Michael Foster, the accountant who had been handling Torres Construction's books since the beginning. Michael had been a friend and advisor for years, and Victoria trusted him completely. But she needed to know if he had been part of Robert's scheme. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest," Victoria said when she sat down in Michael's office. "Have you been helping Robert make changes to our company structure?" Michael's face went pale. "Victoria, I've been trying to figure out how to tell you about this. Robert has been pressuring me to make changes that didn't seem right. He said you had approved them, but something felt off." Victoria felt a wave of relief. Michael wasn't part of the conspiracy. In fact, he had been uncomfortable with Robert's requests but had been told that Victoria was aware of everything. "He had me transfer money between accounts," Michael explained. "He said it was for tax purposes, but the amounts were huge. He also had me change the ownership structure on some of our contracts. I kept asking to speak with you directly, but he said you were too busy with the construction side to be bothered with paperwork." Michael pulled out a folder that he had been keeping separately from the regular company files. "I've been documenting everything he asked me to do. I had a feeling something wasn't right, so I kept copies of all the original documents." Victoria almost cried with relief. Michael's records would provide crucial evidence of Robert's financial manipulation. Combined with the electronic evidence Victoria had already gathered, they would have a strong case. "There's something else," Michael said hesitantly. Robert has been paying someone named Natasha Rivers as a consultant. The payment started small, but they've gotten bigger over time. Last month, he authorized a payment of $15,000 to her for strategic planning services. Victoria felt her anger spike. Robert had been using company money to pay his mistress while telling Victoria they needed to cut costs. He had been financing his affair with money from the business she had built. "I need you to secure all the financial records," Victoria told Michael. "Don't let Robert access anything without my approval. And if he asks why, tell him I'm conducting a routine audit." Michael nodded. "I should have come to you sooner. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to cause problems between you and Robert." Victoria's final stop of the day was the most important. She drove to the office of Linda Washington, a private investigator who specialized in matrimonial cases. Victoria needed to know everything about Natasha Rivers and exactly how long this affair had been going on. "I need a complete background check on this woman," Victoria told Linda, showing her the name and phone number from Robert's messages. "I need to know who she is, what she does, and how she met my husband." Linda was experienced and discreet. She explained that a thorough investigation would take about a week, but she could provide some basic information within a few days. She would also conduct surveillance to document Robert's activities and confirm the affair. "I'll need photos and video evidence," Victoria said. "If this goes to court, I want undeniable proof of what he's been doing." As Victoria drove home that evening, she felt exhausted but empowered. She had spent the day assembling a team of professionals who would help her fight back. Robert thought he had been so clever, planning his betrayal while she remained focused on work. But Victoria was about to show him that she was far more strategic than he had ever imagined. When she arrived home, Robert was already there, sitting in his office with his laptop. Victoria could hear him talking on the phone, probably to Natasha. She listened at the door and caught fragments of the conversation. "Everything is going perfectly," Robert was saying. "She has no idea what's coming. By next week, we'll have everything we need to finalize the transfer." Victoria smiled grimly. Robert was wrong about one thing. She knew exactly what was coming. The question was whether he would be prepared for it. She went to her bedroom and pulled out the business plan she had been working on for months. It was a proposal for expanding Torres Construction into residential development, a project that would triple their revenue within 2 years. She had been planning to surprise Robert with it for their anniversary. Now Victoria realized this business plan would be the foundation of her new life. A life without Robert, but with everything she had worked to build. Victoria's phone rang at 7 in the morning. It was Patricia Chin, the forensic accountant, and her voice was tense with urgency. "We need to meet immediately," Patricia said. "What I found is worse than financial fraud. Your husband has been systematically looting your company." Victoria met Patricia at her office an hour later. The conference table was covered with spreadsheets, bank statements, and financial documents. Patricia had been working through the night, and the evidence she had uncovered was staggering. Over the past 18 months, Robert has transferred over $400,000 from Torres Construction accounts into personal accounts that only he controls, Patricia explained. He's been using a complex series of shell companies to hide the money trail. Victoria stared at the documents, trying to process the magnitude of Robert's theft. $400,000 was enough to fund 2 major construction projects. It was money that should have gone to her workers' bonuses, equipment upgrades, and business expansion. "He's been particularly clever about it," Patricia continued. "He's been transferring money in amounts just small enough to avoid triggering automatic bank alerts. But over time, it adds up to a massive theft." Patricia showed Victoria a chart that tracked the transfers over time. The theft had started small, just a few $1,000s here and there. But as Robert got bolder, the amounts increased. In the past 6 months, he had been stealing almost $30,000 per month. "This isn't just marital infidelity," Patricia said. "This is embezzlement. Your husband could face serious criminal charges for this." Victoria felt a cold satisfaction. Robert had thought he was so clever, but he had made a crucial mistake. In his greed, he had committed crimes that went far beyond adultery. He had stolen from the company that employed dozens of people, and he had used that stolen money to fund his affair. "There's more," Patricia said. "I found evidence that he's been inflating expenses and skimming money from contractor payments. He's been stealing from your suppliers and your clients as well as from you." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Linda Washington, the private investigator. "Need to meet ASAP. Major developments." Victoria met Linda at a coffee shop across town. Linda had been conducting surveillance on Robert for only 3 days, but she had already uncovered information that would change everything. Your husband isn't just having an affair, Linda said, sliding a manila folder across the table. He's been planning to start a competing business with his mistress. Inside the folder were photos of Robert and Natasha meeting with potential investors. There were documents showing that they had already registered a new company called Rivers Construction, and had been pitching clients to leave Torres Construction for their new venture. They've been using your company's client list to steal your customers, Linda explained. They've been promising lower prices and faster completion times. They're essentially planning to destroy Torres Construction and replace it with their own company. Victoria felt her anger reach a new level. Robert wasn't just stealing her money and her marriage. He was trying to destroy her professional reputation and steal her clients. He was attempting to eliminate her from the industry she had helped build. I have video of them meeting with the Henderson Group, Linda said. That's the client you've been courting for the past year for the downtown renovation project. They're trying to convince the Hendersons to break their contract with Torres Construction and sign with Rivers Construction instead. Victoria's hands shook as she looked at the photos. In one image, Robert and Natasha were shaking hands with potential investors. In another, they were touring a construction site that Torres Construction was currently working on, obviously showing it off as an example of their capabilities. The most damaging evidence is this, Linda said, pulling out a recording device. I managed to get audio of them discussing their plans. They're not just trying to steal your business. They're planning to destroy your reputation in the industry. Victoria listened to the recording with growing horror. Robert and Natasha were discussing ways to spread rumors about Torres Construction's reliability. They were planning to sabotage current projects to make Victoria look incompetent. They were even discussing ways to poach her best workers. Once Victoria's company fails, everyone will see that she was never really capable of running a construction business, Natasha said on the recording. They'll realize that Robert was the real talent behind Torres Construction all along. Victoria had to pause the recording. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that it took her breath away. Robert wasn't just leaving her. He was trying to destroy her entire professional life. There's one more thing, Linda said. Natasha Rivers isn't who she claims to be. She's not a recent business school graduate. She's been working in construction for 5 years, and she was fired from her last job for trying to steal clients. Victoria felt pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Robert hadn't just stumbled into an affair with a young woman. He had been recruited by someone who had a history of corporate theft. Together, they had been planning to destroy Torres Construction from the inside. Victoria's phone rang. It was James Rodriguez, her divorce attorney. I've got good news and bad news, James said. The good news is that we've successfully frozen Robert's access to your joint accounts. The bad news is that his lawyer is fighting back harder than expected. They're claiming you've been embezzling money from the company. Victoria felt a chill. Robert was trying to turn the tables on her, accusing her of the very crimes he had been committing. Don't worry, James said. We have the evidence to prove otherwise. But this is going to be a bigger fight than we initially thought. Robert's lawyer is playing hardball. Victoria hung up the phone and looked at the evidence spread across the coffee shop table. Photos, documents, recordings, and financial records that proved Robert's systematic betrayal. She had enough evidence to destroy him legally, professionally, and personally. But Victoria realized that simply exposing Robert's crimes wasn't enough. He had spent 2 years planning to destroy her life. Now she was going to spend the next few months planning to destroy his. Victoria gathered the evidence and drove to her office. She needed to secure her position at Torres Construction and make sure Robert couldn't do any more damage. But she also needed to plan her counterattack carefully. Robert thought he was playing chess while she was playing checkers. He was about to learn that Victoria Torres was a grandmaster. As she walked into her office, Victoria saw Robert at his desk, talking on the phone. He looked up and smiled at her, the same fake smile he had been giving her for months. How are you feeling, honey? He asked, covering the phone. Better today? Victoria smiled back, matching his false warmth. Much better. I'm ready to get back to work. Robert had no idea that Victoria now knew everything. He had no idea that his carefully planned scheme was about to backfire spectacularly. He had no idea that the woman he had been betraying was about to become his worst nightmare. Victoria sat down at her desk and opened her laptop. She had work to do, and for the first time in months she was excited about it. Victoria chose a Tuesday morning for the confrontation. She had been planning it for 2 weeks, gathering every piece of evidence and preparing for every possible response Robert might give. She had documents, recordings, photographs, and financial records that proved beyond any doubt what Robert had been doing. But more than that, Victoria had been preparing herself emotionally. She had practiced the conversation in her mind dozens of times. She had imagined Robert's denials, his excuses, his attempts to turn the situation around on her. She was ready for all of it. Victoria arrived at the office early and asked their assistant Carol to clear Robert's schedule for the morning. She told Carol there was an urgent business matter that needed Robert's full attention. Carol, who had been with the company for 8 years, could sense the tension in Victoria's voice but didn't ask questions. When Robert arrived at 9 o'clock, Victoria was waiting in the conference room. She had arranged all of her evidence in neat stacks on the table, each category labeled and organized. Financial records, phone records, surveillance photos, and legal documents were spread across the surface like weapons in an arsenal. "Good morning, honey," Robert said as he entered the room. "Carol said you needed to discuss something urgent about the business?" Victoria looked at her husband of 15 years and felt nothing but disgust. The man she had loved, trusted, and built a life with was a stranger. Worse than a stranger, he was an enemy who had been living in her house and sharing her bed while plotting to destroy her. "Sit down, Robert," Victoria said quietly. "We need to talk." Robert sat across from her, his eyes scanning the documents on the table. Victoria saw the moment when recognition dawned on his face. His confident smile faltered and his skin went pale. "I know about Natasha," Victoria said simply. "I know about the affair, the embezzlement, and the plan to steal my company." Robert's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Victoria had imagined this moment for weeks, but seeing his shock and fear in person was more satisfying than she had expected. "I know about Rivers Construction," Victoria continued. "I know about the $400,000 you've stolen from our accounts. I know about the clients you've been trying to poach, the investors you've been meeting with, and the employees you've been planning to steal." Victoria picked up a stack of photographs and slid them across the table. They showed Robert and Natasha at restaurants, holding hands in hotel lobbies, and meeting with potential business partners. "I know about the shell companies you created to hide the money," Victoria said. "I know about the fake consulting fees you've been paying to Natasha. I know about the business plan you wrote describing me as dead. Weight that needed to be eliminated." Robert finally found his voice. "Victoria, I can explain?" "No," Victoria interrupted. "You can't explain. There's no explanation for what you've done. You've been stealing from me, lying to me, and planning to destroy me for at least 2 years. Maybe longer." Victoria pulled out her phone and played one of the recordings Linda had captured. Robert's voice filled the room. "Victoria is too stupid to notice what's happening right under her nose. By the time she figures it out, it'll be too late." Robert's face went white. "Where did you get that?" "It doesn't matter where I got it," Victoria said. "What matters is that I have it. I have all of it. Every email, every text message, every financial transfer, every secret meeting. I have enough evidence to destroy you professionally, personally, and legally." Victoria stood up and walked to the window overlooking the construction site where her workers were building homes for young families. These were good people who trusted her, who depended on Torres Construction for their livelihoods. Robert had been willing to destroy all of that for his own greed. "The question is," Victoria said, turning back to Robert, "what are you going to do about it?" Robert tried to recover his composure. "Victoria, you're overreacting. Yes, I've been having an affair and I'm sorry about that. But everything else, you're misunderstanding the situation." Victoria almost laughed. Even caught red-handed, Robert was still trying to manipulate her. "Am I misunderstanding the $400,000 you transferred out of our accounts? Am I misunderstanding the client list you gave to Natasha? Am I misunderstanding the business plan that describes me as incompetent?" "Those were just contingency plans," Robert said weakly. "I wasn't actually going to go through with them." "You registered Rivers Construction 3 months ago," Victoria said. "You've been meeting with investors for weeks. You've already started stealing our clients. These aren't contingency plans, Robert. This is systematic theft and betrayal." Victoria sat back down and looked directly at Robert. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to sign divorce papers today. You're going to transfer your shares of Torres Construction to me for $1. You're going to return every penny you've stolen from the company accounts. And you're going to stay away from my clients, my employees, and my business." Robert's shock was turning to anger. "You can't force me to do any of that. I built this company just as much as you did." "No, you didn't," Victoria said coldly. "I built this company while you took credit for my work. I designed the projects, I managed the clients, I supervised the construction. You handled paperwork and schmoozing, and apparently, you couldn't even do that honestly. Victoria picked up another stack of documents. These are statements from our accountant, our lawyer, and 3 of our biggest clients. They all confirmed that I was the driving force behind Torres Construction's success. You were just along for the ride. And now I have evidence that you've been stealing from the company, Victoria continued. Embezzlement is a felony, Robert. You could go to prison for what you've done. Robert stood up abruptly. You're bluffing. You would never actually press charges. It would hurt the company's reputation. Victoria smiled for the first time during the conversation. Try me. The smile seemed to unnerve Robert more than anything else Victoria had said. He sat back down slowly, the fight going out of him. What do you want? He asked quietly. I want you gone, Victoria said. I want you out of my business, out of my life, and out of my house. I want you to take your girlfriend and your stolen money and disappear. And I want you to never, ever contact me again. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked up at Victoria with an expression she had never seen before. It was hatred, pure and simple. You think you've won, he said. But you have no idea what you're up against. Natasha is smarter than you, younger than you, and better connected than you. Rivers Construction is going to destroy Torres Construction, and there's nothing you can do about it. Victoria felt a chill at the venom in Robert's voice. This was the real Robert, the man who had been hiding behind a mask of love and support for years. This was the man who had been planning to destroy her life. We'll see about that, Victoria said quietly. Robert stood up and walked toward the door. Then he turned back to Victoria with a cruel smile. You know what the funny thing is? He said. I never loved you. Not really. I loved what you could do for me. I loved your business skills and your connections. But you as a person? You're boring, Victoria. You're obsessed with work, you have no sense of fun, and you're terrible in bed. Victoria felt the words hit her like physical blows. Even knowing that Robert was trying to hurt her, the cruelty of his words was devastating. Natasha is everything you're not, Robert continued. She's passionate, exciting, and she actually enjoys life. She's going to help me build something bigger and better than Torres Construction ever was. Get out, Victoria said quietly. With pleasure, Robert said. Enjoy your little company while it lasts. Because once I'm done with you, no one in this industry will ever want to work with you again. Robert walked out of the conference room, leaving Victoria alone with her evidence and her shattered marriage. She sat in the silence for a long time, trying to process what had just happened. The conversation had gone exactly as she had planned, but Robert's final words had shaken her more than she wanted to admit. She had been prepared for his anger and his denials, but she hadn't been prepared for his cruelty. Victoria looked out the window at her construction site. Her workers were taking their lunch break, sitting in the shade and laughing about something. These were good people who trusted her to lead them. They were depending on her to be strong. Victoria gathered her evidence and walked back to her office. She had work to do. Robert thought he could destroy her, but he had no idea who he was really dealing with. Victoria Torres had built an empire once, and she was going to build it again. But first she was going to make sure Robert paid for what he had done. The divorce papers were filed within 24 hours of Victoria's confrontation with Robert. James Rodriguez had been prepared for Robert's response, but even he was surprised by how quickly things escalated. His lawyer is claiming you've been having an affair, James told Victoria over the phone. They're saying you've been embezzling money to fund secret relationships and that Robert only discovered it recently. Victoria felt her blood pressure spike. That's completely false and they know it. Of course it's false, James said. But they're playing dirty. They're trying to muddy the waters and make it look like you're both equally guilty. It's a common tactic in high-stakes divorce cases. Victoria was sitting in her office, looking out at the construction site where her workers were installing windows in the new housing development. These people depended on her leadership, and she wasn't going to let Robert's lies destroy their livelihoods. What's their strategy? Victoria asked. They're going to claim that you were so focused on your alleged affairs that you neglected the business, James explained. They're saying that Robert had to take control of the finances to save the company from your mismanagement. Victoria almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Robert was trying to rewrite history, portraying himself as the responsible partner who had been forced to take drastic action to save the company from his wife's reckless behavior. They can't prove something that never happened, Victoria said. They don't need to prove it, James replied. They just need to create reasonable doubt. If they can make it look like you're both equally culpable, they can argue for a 50-50 split of assets. Victoria understood the strategy. Robert couldn't win a clean fight, so he was going to try to drag her down to his level. He was betting that Victoria would be so concerned about protecting her reputation that she would agree to a settlement that gave him half of everything. "What do we do?" Victoria asked. "We fight back harder than they expect," James said. "We have the evidence to prove Robert's crimes. We're going to use it." The next few weeks were a blur of depositions, document production, and legal maneuvering. Robert's lawyer, a smooth-talking man named Richard Sterling, was everything Victoria had expected. He was expensive, aggressive, and completely without scruples. Sterling's strategy became clear during Victoria's first deposition. He spent hours asking intrusive questions about her personal life, her work habits, and her relationships with employees and clients. He was trying to paint a picture of Victoria as a woman who was so obsessed with work that she had neglected her marriage and driven her husband to find comfort elsewhere. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Torres, that you routinely work 12-hour days?" Sterling asked during one particularly grueling session. "I worked as many hours as necessary to make the business successful," Victoria replied. "And isn't it true that you often traveled for business without your husband?" "I traveled when projects required it." "And during these business trips, did you maintain contact with your husband?" Victoria saw where this was going. Sterling was trying to suggest that her business travel had created opportunities for affairs, even though no such affairs had ever occurred. "I maintained appropriate contact with my husband," Victoria said carefully. "What do you consider appropriate contact, Mrs. Torres? Daily phone calls? Text messages? Video calls?" James objected. "Relevance. The witness's communication patterns with her husband are relevant to the question of marital breakdown," Sterling replied smoothly. Victoria realized that Sterling was creating a record that would allow him to argue that she had been emotionally absent from her marriage, justifying Robert's affair and his decision to protect the business from her alleged neglect. But Victoria had been preparing for this battle for months. She had documentation of every business trip, every client meeting, and every project she had overseen. She had evidence of her dedication to both her marriage and her business. More importantly, she had evidence of Robert's crimes. "Mr. Sterling," Victoria said during a break in the deposition, "I think you should know that I have recordings of your client discussing his plans to frame me for embezzlement." Sterling's confident expression faltered. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "I have audio recordings of Robert and his girlfriend planning to make false accusations against me," Victoria said. "I have video evidence of them meeting with my clients and trying to steal my business. I have financial records proving that Robert embezzled over $400,000 from our company." Sterling looked shaken. "Mrs. Torres, I think you should be very careful about making accusations you can't prove." "I can prove every word of it," Victoria said. "The question is whether you want to continue with this scorched earth strategy, or whether you want to discuss a reasonable settlement." Sterling excused himself to call Robert. Victoria could hear raised voices through the conference room wall. When Sterling returned, his demeanor had changed completely. "My client is willing to discuss settlement terms," he said quietly. But Victoria was no longer interested in a quiet settlement. Robert had tried to destroy her reputation and steal her life's work. He had made cruel and false accusations against her. He had shown her exactly who he really was, and she was going to make sure the world knew it too. "I'm not interested in a settlement," Victoria said. "I want this to go to trial. I want a public record of what your client has done." Sterling looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Torres, I don't think you understand the risks of going to trial. These proceedings can be very damaging to all parties involved. The only person who should be worried about damage is your client," Victoria replied. "I have nothing to hide." James smiled. Victoria was calling their bluff, and Sterling knew it. Robert had been counting on Victoria's desire to avoid public scrutiny to force a favorable settlement. But Victoria was past caring about public opinion. She wanted justice. "We'll need some time to consider our options," Sterling said. "Take all the time you need," Victoria said. "But understand that every day you delay, I'm gathering more evidence of your client's criminal behavior. The longer this drags on, the worse it's going to get for him." After Sterling left, James turned to Victoria with admiration. "That was brilliant. You just completely changed the dynamic of this case." "Robert thought he could intimidate me into accepting a bad deal," Victoria said. "He's about to learn that I don't intimidate easily." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Chin, the forensic accountant. "Found something big. Need to meet immediately." Victoria met Patricia at her office that afternoon. Patricia had been digging deeper into Torres Construction's financial records, and what she had found was devastating for Robert. "He's been stealing for longer than we thought," Patricia said. "I found evidence going back 4 years. The total amount he's embezzled is over $700,000. Victoria felt dizzy. $700,000 was more than she had imagined. It was enough to fund major business expansion, enough to give her workers substantial raises, enough to secure the company's future for years. "There's more," Patricia continued. "He's been using the stolen money to invest in other businesses. He's been building a portfolio of assets that he's hidden from you." Patricia showed Victoria documents proving that Robert had been using the embezzled funds to invest in real estate, stocks, and other businesses. He had been building wealth while telling Victoria that they needed to tighten their belts. "This changes everything," Victoria said. "This isn't just marital infidelity or even simple embezzlement. This is large-scale financial fraud." "It gets worse," Patricia said. "Some of the money he invested came from client accounts. He's been using money that clients paid for specific projects to fund his personal investments." Victoria felt sick. Robert hadn't just been stealing from her. He had been stealing from their clients, putting Torres Construction at risk of lawsuits and bankruptcy. "We need to contact the district attorney," Victoria said. "This is criminal fraud on a massive scale." Victoria called James immediately. When she explained Patricia's findings, James was quiet for a long moment. "Victoria, this is much bigger than a divorce case," he said finally. "Your husband could be looking at serious prison time. Are you prepared for that?" Victoria thought about Robert's cruel words during their confrontation. She thought about the 2 years he had spent planning to destroy her life. She thought about the clients and employees he had put at risk with his greed. "Yes," she said. "I'm prepared for that." Victoria hung up the phone and looked out the window at her construction site. Her workers were finishing up for the day, proud of the progress they had made. These were good people who deserved better than a boss who stole from them. Robert had thought he could destroy her quietly, taking everything she had built while she remained unaware. But Victoria was about to show him the consequences of underestimating her. The legal battle was just beginning, but Victoria already knew she was going to win. She had the evidence, the law, and the truth on her side. Most importantly, she had the determination to see it through to the end. Robert Torres was about to learn that Victoria Torres was much more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Victoria received the call on a Thursday morning while she was reviewing blueprints for a new commercial project. It was Detective Sarah Martinez from the Financial Crimes Division of the District Attorney's Office. "Mrs. Torres, we need to meet with you immediately," Detective Martinez said. "We've been investigating your husband's financial activities, and we've uncovered something significant." Victoria met Detective Martinez and Prosecutor David Kim at the District Attorney's office that afternoon. The conference room was filled with boxes of documents, computer printouts, and financial records. Victoria realized that law enforcement had been building a case against Robert for months. "We've been tracking suspicious financial activity related to Torres Construction for 6 months, Detective Martinez explained. "Your husband's name came up in connection with several other cases we're investigating." Victoria felt a chill. "Other cases?" "Your husband has been part of a larger fraud scheme," Prosecutor Kim said. "He's been working with a network of individuals to steal money from construction companies across the state." Victoria stared at the evidence spread across the table. Bank records showed that Robert had been in contact with people she had never heard of, transferring money to accounts in different states and even different countries. "Natasha Rivers is not just your husband's girlfriend," Detective Martinez continued. "She's a professional con artist who specializes in infiltrating construction companies. She's done this before in Texas, Arizona, and Nevada." Victoria felt the room spinning. Robert's affair wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was part of a calculated criminal enterprise designed to steal money from businesses like hers. "How long has this been going on?" Victoria asked. "We believe Natasha targeted your husband about 3 years ago," Detective Martinez said. "She studied Torres Construction's financial structure and identified Robert as the weak link. She seduced him and convinced him to help her steal from the company." Victoria realized that everything she had believed about Robert's betrayal was wrong. He wasn't just a cheating husband who had gotten greedy. He was a victim of a sophisticated criminal operation, but he was also a willing participant who had chosen greed over loyalty. "The good news is that we have enough evidence to arrest both of them," Prosecutor Kim said. "The bad news is that they've stolen money from dozens of companies. Torres Construction is just one of many victims." Victoria looked at a chart showing the scope of the criminal enterprise. Robert and Natasha had been stealing from construction companies across the Southwest, using the same pattern each time. Natasha would seduce a key executive, usually someone with access to company finances, and convince them to help her steal money. They've stolen over $3 million from various companies, Detective Martinez said. Your husband's theft of $700,000 from Torres Construction is actually one of the smaller cases. Victoria felt sick. Robert had destroyed their marriage and put her company at risk for what was, in the context of this criminal enterprise, a relatively small amount of money. There's something else, Prosecutor Kim said. We have evidence that they were planning to disappear with the money. They had fake identities prepared and plane tickets to a non-extradition country. Victoria realized how close she had come to losing everything. If she hadn't discovered Robert's betrayal when she did, he and Natasha would have vanished with all the money they had stolen, leaving her with a bankrupt company and massive legal problems. We're going to arrest them tomorrow, Detective Martinez said. We wanted to give you advance warning because this is going to be a major news story. The media is going to be very interested in this case. Victoria drove home in a daze. She had thought she was dealing with a cheating husband and a business dispute. Instead, she had been living with a criminal who was part of a multi-state fraud conspiracy. When she arrived home, Robert was packing suitcases in their bedroom. He looked up when she entered, and she saw something in his expression that she had never seen before. It was fear. Going somewhere? Victoria asked. Natasha and I are taking a vacation, Robert said, not meeting her eyes. We need some time to figure things out. Victoria realized that Robert knew the investigation was closing in. He was trying to flee before he could be arrested. She thought about warning him, but then remembered Detective Martinez's words. Robert was planning to disappear with stolen money, leaving her to face the consequences of his crimes. Have a good trip, Victoria said calmly. Robert looked surprised by her response. He had probably expected her to try to stop him or to beg him to stay. Instead, Victoria walked to her closet and began packing her own suitcase. Where are you going? Robert asked. I'm going to stay at my sister's house for a few days, Victoria said. I need some space to think. Robert seemed relieved. That's probably a good idea. We both need time to cool down. Victoria packed methodically, including all of her important documents and jewelry. She wasn't planning to return to this house for a while. Tomorrow, when Robert was arrested, this place would become a crime scene. Victoria, Robert said as she was finishing her packing, I want you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. Victoria looked at her husband of 15 years. Even now, facing arrest and imprisonment, he was still trying to manipulate her. He was still trying to present himself as a victim of circumstances rather than a willing participant in a criminal conspiracy. I know exactly what you meant, Robert, Victoria said. You meant to steal my money and destroy my life. You meant to run away with your girlfriend and leave me with nothing. Robert started to protest, but Victoria held up her hand. I know about the fake identities. I know about the plane tickets. I know about the $3 million you and Natasha have stolen from other companies. Robert's face went white. How do you know about that? The FBI has been investigating you for months, Victoria said. They know everything. Robert sat down heavily on the bed. Victoria, you have to understand. Natasha made me do it. She threatened to expose our affair if I didn't help her. I was trapped. Victoria felt a moment of pity for the man she had once loved. But then she remembered his cruel words during their confrontation, his attempts to frame her for his crimes, and his willingness to destroy her reputation. You made your choice, Robert, Victoria said. Now you have to live with the consequences. Victoria left the house that night, driving to her sister Maria's place across town. She didn't tell Maria about the investigation or the impending arrests. She just said she needed a place to stay while she figured out her next steps. The next morning, Victoria was having coffee with Maria when her phone rang. It was Detective Martinez. We've arrested Robert and Natasha, the detective said. They were at the airport about to board a flight to Costa Rica. They had fake passports and over $200,000 in cash. Victoria felt a wave of relief. Robert's criminal career was over, and he would face justice for what he had done. More importantly, she could finally start rebuilding her life and her business. What happens next? Victoria asked. They'll be arraigned this afternoon, Detective Martinez said. The prosecutor is planning to ask for high bail given the flight risk. This is going to be a major case, Mrs. Torres. Your husband is looking at 20 to 30 years in prison. Victoria hung up the phone and looked at Maria, who had been listening to the conversation with growing concern. "What's going on, Victoria?" Maria asked. Victoria told her sister everything. The affair, the embezzlement, the criminal conspiracy, and the arrests. Maria listened in shock, occasionally asking questions but mostly just letting Victoria tell her story. "I can't believe Robert would do something like this," Maria said when Victoria finished. "He always seemed so devoted to you." "He was devoted to my money," Victoria said. "He never loved me. He loved what I could do for him." Victoria felt surprisingly calm. The past few months had been the worst of her life, but they had also been the most clarifying. She had learned who she really was and what she was capable of. She had discovered that she was stronger than she had ever imagined. "What are you going to do now?" Maria asked. Victoria looked out the window at the city where she had built her business and her life. Torres Construction was still operating, her workers were still building homes for families, and her clients still trusted her leadership. "I'm going to rebuild," Victoria said. "I'm going to make Torres Construction bigger and better than ever. And I'm going to show everyone that Robert Torres was never the real power behind the company." Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from James Rodriguez, her divorce attorney. "Robert's arrest changes everything. Call me when you're ready to discuss next steps." Victoria smiled. She was ready to discuss next steps. She was ready to move forward with her life. She was ready to show the world what Victoria Torres could accomplish when she was no longer being held back by a criminal husband. The legal battle was far from over, but Victoria had already won the war. She had her freedom, her company, and her future. Robert had his prison sentence and his criminal record. As far as Victoria was concerned, that was exactly what they both deserved. The news of Robert's arrest made headlines across the state. "Construction executive arrested in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme," ran on the front page of the business section, complete with photos of Robert and Natasha being led away in handcuffs. Victoria watched the coverage from Maria's living room, feeling a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The phone call started immediately. Reporters wanted interviews, clients wanted reassurances, and competitors wanted to know if Torres Construction would survive the scandal. Victoria realized that Robert's arrest was just the beginning of her challenges. Now she had to prove that she could rebuild her company's reputation and continue operating without him. Victoria's first priority was her employees. She called an emergency meeting at the office, gathering all 43 people who worked for Torres Construction. These were the people who had trusted her leadership, who had built their careers with her company, and who deserved to know the truth about what had happened. "I know you've all seen the news," Victoria began, standing in front of the conference room filled with construction workers, project managers, and office staff. "I want you to hear the truth directly from me." Victoria explained the situation as clearly as she could. Robert had been stealing money from the company for years. He had been working with a criminal organization to defraud Torres Construction and other businesses. He had been planning to disappear with the stolen money, leaving the company bankrupt and all of them unemployed. "But that's not going to happen," Victoria said firmly. "Torres Construction is going to survive this. We're going to rebuild, we're going to grow, and we're going to show everyone that we're stronger than one man's greed." Victoria outlined her plan for the company's future. She would be taking full control of all operations, something she had effectively been doing for years anyway. She would be hiring new financial staff to ensure transparency and accountability. Most importantly, she would be expanding the company's services and taking on larger projects. "I know some of you are worried about your jobs," Victoria said. "I want you to know that no one is going to be laid off because of Robert's crimes. In fact, I'm planning to hire more people over the next year." The response from her employees was overwhelmingly positive. Many of them had suspected that something was wrong with the company's finances, but they had trusted Victoria to handle it. Now they were ready to support her as she rebuilt. "We've always known you were the real boss," said Tom Henderson, the site foreman who had been with the company for 8 years. "Robert was just the guy who signed the checks." Victoria felt a surge of gratitude for these people who had remained loyal to her even in the face of scandal and uncertainty. They were the real foundation of Torres Construction, not the financial accounts that Robert had been stealing from. Victoria's next challenge was her clients. Several major projects were in progress, and she needed to reassure the clients that Torres Construction would complete them on time and on budget despite the upheaval. The Henderson Group, the client that Robert and Natasha had been trying to steal, was Victoria's biggest concern. The downtown renovation project was worth over $2 million, and losing it would be devastating for the company. Victoria met with Jonathan Henderson, the company's CEO, at his office downtown. She had prepared extensively for this meeting, bringing detailed project timelines, financial projections, and references from other satisfied clients. "I'll be honest with you, Victoria," Jonathan said. "The news about Robert has made our board nervous. They're questioning whether Torres Construction is stable enough to complete this project." Victoria had expected this response. "I understand your concerns," she said. "But I want you to know that Robert's arrest actually makes Torres Construction stronger, not weaker." Victoria explained how Robert's theft had been draining resources from the company for years. With that drain eliminated, Torres Construction was actually in a better financial position than it had been in months. "More importantly," Victoria continued, "Robert was never the person managing your project. I've been overseeing every aspect of the downtown renovation personally. My arrest doesn't change that." Victoria showed Jonathan the detailed project plans she had developed, the construction timeline she had created, and the quality control measures she had implemented. She demonstrated that she was the real driving force behind Torres Construction's success. "I have a proposal for you," Victoria said. "Let me complete the first phase of your project ahead of schedule and under budget. If you're not completely satisfied with the results, you can terminate the contract with no penalty." Jonathan was impressed by Victoria's confidence and professionalism. By the end of the meeting, he had agreed to continue with the project. More importantly, he had agreed to serve as a reference for Victoria when she pitched other potential clients. Victoria's counterattack was working. Instead of hiding from the scandal, she was using it as an opportunity to show her clients and competitors that she was the real power behind Torres Construction. She was proving that Robert's arrest had eliminated a liability, not an asset. The legal proceedings continued throughout the summer. Robert and Natasha were both denied bail due to flight risk, and they remained in jail while their lawyers tried to negotiate plea deals. Victoria testified before the grand jury, providing evidence of the financial crimes that had been committed against her company. The most satisfying moment came when Victoria was asked to testify at Robert's sentencing hearing. She had the opportunity to address the court directly, explaining how Robert's crimes had affected her personally and professionally. "Robert Torres stole more than money from me," Victoria told the judge. "He stole 15 years of my life. He stole my trust, my sense of security, and my ability to believe in the person I thought I loved." Victoria described how Robert's betrayal had forced her to question everything she believed about her marriage, her business, and herself. She explained how his attempts to frame her for his crimes had put her reputation and her company at risk. "But I want the court to know that Robert Torres did not destroy me," Victoria said. "He made me stronger. He forced me to discover capabilities I didn't know I had. He taught me that I don't need anyone else to validate my success." The judge sentenced Robert to 25 years in prison. Natasha received a similar sentence. Both would be eligible for parole in 12 years, but their criminal careers were effectively over. Victoria left the courthouse feeling a sense of closure she hadn't expected. Robert was no longer a threat to her or her business. She was free to move forward with her life without looking over her shoulder. But Victoria's real triumph wasn't Robert's imprisonment. It was what she had built while he was being prosecuted. Torres Construction had not only survived the scandal, it had thrived. Victoria had used the crisis as an opportunity to expand her business, improve her operations, and strengthen her relationships with clients and employees. The company that emerged from the scandal was leaner, more efficient, and more profitable than it had ever been. Victoria had proven that she didn't need Robert to succeed. In fact, she was better off without him. As Victoria drove home from the courthouse, she thought about the woman she had been a year ago. That woman had been dependent on her husband's approval, uncertain of her own abilities, and willing to let others take credit for her work. The woman driving home now was completely different. She was confident, independent, and ready to take on any challenge. She had built an empire once and she had rebuilt it even stronger. Victoria Torres was no longer Robert's wife or Robert's business partner. She was Victoria Torres, CEO of Torres Construction, and she was just getting started. 6 months after Robert's sentencing, Victoria received a call that would complete her transformation from victim to victor. It was from Detective Martinez, and her voice carried a tone of professional satisfaction. "Mrs. Torres, I have some news that I think you'll find interesting," the detective said. "We've recovered most of the money that was stolen from your company." Victoria had been preparing for the possibility that the stolen funds would never be recovered. She had rebuilt Torres Construction's finances through careful management and increased business, but getting back the $700,000 that Robert had stolen would secure the company's future completely. "How much were you able to recover?" Victoria asked. "Almost everything," Detective Martinez said. Robert and Natasha had hidden the money in various accounts, but they kept detailed records. We were able to trace and freeze the accounts before they could move the money offshore. Victoria felt a surge of relief and vindication. Not only had she survived Robert's betrayal, but she was going to recover financially as well. The stolen money would allow her to expand Torres Construction even further and provide better benefits for her employees. There's more, Detective Martinez continued. The investigation into the broader fraud scheme has led to the arrest of 12 other individuals. The network that targeted your company has been completely dismantled. Victoria realized that her decision to pursue criminal charges against Robert had helped protect other potential victims. By refusing to accept a quiet settlement, she had contributed to the destruction of a criminal enterprise that had been operating for years. The financial recovery was just the beginning of Victoria's complete triumph. Over the past year, Torres Construction had not only survived the scandal but had become more successful than ever. Victoria had used the crisis to implement new systems, hire better staff, and pursue larger projects. The company's reputation had actually improved during the crisis. Victoria's handling of the situation had impressed clients and competitors alike. She had been transparent about the problems, aggressive in solving them, and successful in rebuilding. Industry publications had written articles about her turnaround strategy, and she had been invited to speak at business conferences. Victoria's personal life had also improved dramatically. The divorce had been finalized months ago, with Victoria receiving full ownership of Torres Construction and the marital home. She had also been awarded substantial damages for Robert's theft and fraud. More importantly, Victoria had rediscovered herself. For years, she had defined herself primarily as Robert's wife and business partner. Now she was simply Victoria Torres, successful businesswoman and independent woman. She had learned to enjoy her own company, to make decisions without seeking approval, and to take pride in her accomplishments. The most unexpected development was romantic. Victoria had met Daniel Rodriguez, an architect who had been hired to design a new office building for Torres Construction. Daniel was everything Robert had not been: honest, supportive, and genuinely interested in Victoria as a person rather than as a business asset. Daniel had known about Victoria's history before they started dating. He had read the news articles about Robert's arrest and had been impressed by how Victoria had handled the crisis. He was attracted to her strength and independence, not threatened by it. "I've never met anyone like you," Daniel had told Victoria during one of their first dates. "You built a company from nothing, survived a betrayal that would have destroyed most people, and came back stronger than ever. That's incredibly attractive." Victoria had been hesitant about dating again. Her trust had been shattered by Robert's betrayal, and she wasn't sure she was ready to open herself up to potential hurt again. But Daniel had been patient, understanding, and consistently supportive. Their relationship was completely different from Victoria's marriage to Robert. Daniel encouraged Victoria's ambition and celebrated her successes. He was proud to be associated with her rather than threatened by her accomplishments. He supported her goals rather than trying to undermine them. Victoria's professional triumph was complete when she received a call from the mayor's office. The city was planning a major infrastructure project that would require the construction of several new municipal buildings. It was the largest construction contract in the city's history, worth over $50 million. "We'd like Torres Construction to lead the project," the mayor's chief of staff told Victoria. "Your company has an excellent reputation for quality and reliability. Given how you've handled the recent challenges, we're confident you can manage a project of this scope." Victoria felt a sense of pride that eclipsed anything she had felt during her marriage to Robert. This was recognition of her abilities, her leadership, and her company's excellence. It was validation that she had not only survived Robert's betrayal but had thrived because of it. The municipal project would triple Torres Construction's revenue and establish Victoria as one of the most successful contractors in the state. It would also create jobs for hundreds of workers and contribute to the economic development of the city. Victoria thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, when she had first discovered Robert's betrayal. That woman had been devastated, confused, and uncertain about her future. She had felt like her life was over and that she had lost everything that mattered to her. The woman she was now was completely different. She was confident, successful, and in control of her own destiny. She had built a thriving business, recovered from financial losses, and found love again. She had proven that she was stronger than any betrayal and more capable than any critic. Victoria's phone rang. It was Daniel, calling to congratulate her on winning the municipal contract. The news had already spread through the industry, and he was proud of her accomplishment. "I'm taking you out to celebrate," Daniel said. "This is incredible, Victoria. You should be so proud of what you've accomplished." Victoria looked around her office, which had been completely redecorated since Robert's departure. The walls were covered with photos of completed projects, awards from industry organizations, and thank you letters from satisfied clients. Her desk overlooked the construction site where her latest project was nearing completion. "I am proud," Victoria said. "I'm proud of the company I've built, the people I've hired, and the life I've created." Victoria hung up the phone and walked to the window. Below, her construction crew was working on the final details of a housing development that would provide homes for 50 families. These were skilled workers who trusted her leadership and took pride in their work. Victoria thought about Robert, sitting in his prison cell, probably wondering how everything had gone so wrong. He had thought he was so clever, planning to steal her life's work and disappear with his criminal girlfriend. He had underestimated her completely. Robert had lost everything. His freedom, his reputation, his money, and his future. Victoria had gained everything: independence, success, respect, and love. The downfall was complete. Robert Torres was a convicted criminal with no prospects and no hope. Victoria Torres was a successful businesswoman with unlimited potential and a bright future. As Victoria prepared to leave her office for the day, she felt a sense of satisfaction that was deeper than revenge. She had not only survived Robert's betrayal, she had used it as fuel for her own success. She had transformed the worst experience of her life into the foundation for her greatest triumphs. Victoria Torres was no longer the woman who had been victimized by her husband's greed. She was the woman who had built an empire, overcome every obstacle, and emerged stronger than ever. The game was over and Victoria had won. 2 years after Robert's sentencing, Victoria stood in the lobby of the new Torres construction headquarters, a gleaming glass and steel building that she had designed and built with her own company. The building was a testament to her vision and success, rising 20 stories above the city where she had started with nothing but determination and a business degree. The past 2 years had been the most fulfilling of Victoria's life. Torres Construction had become the largest construction company in the state, with over 200 employees and projects spanning multiple cities. Victoria had been featured on the cover of Business Weekly as Entrepreneur of the Year, and her story had inspired countless other women to pursue their own business dreams. The municipal infrastructure project had been completed 6 months ahead of schedule and 15% under budget. The success had led to additional contracts with state agencies and private developers. Victoria's reputation for excellence and reliability had made Torres Construction the most sought-after contractor in the region. But Victoria's personal life had been even more rewarding than her professional success. Her relationship with Daniel had deepened into something she had never experienced with Robert. A true partnership based on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love. Daniel had proposed to Victoria 6 months ago, not with grand gestures or elaborate planning, but with a simple conversation about their future together. He had asked her to marry him because he wanted to build a life with her, not because he wanted access to her success or her money. "I love you for who you are," Daniel had said when he proposed. "I love your strength, your intelligence, and your compassion. I love how you've overcome every challenge and used them to become even stronger. I want to be part of your life, not because of what you can do for me, but because of who you are." Victoria had said yes immediately. The engagement ring Daniel had chosen was simple and elegant, reflecting her practical nature and his understanding of her preferences. It was nothing like the ostentatious ring Robert had given her 15 years ago, and Victoria preferred it that way. The wedding was scheduled for next month, and Victoria was approaching it with excitement rather than anxiety. She had learned the difference between a marriage based on genuine partnership and one based on convenience and manipulation. Victoria's office occupied the entire 20th floor of the new building, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city she had helped build. The walls were covered with photos of completed projects, awards from industry organizations, and thank you letters from satisfied clients. But the most meaningful item in Victoria's office was a framed letter from one of her former employees, a young woman named Lisa who had been inspired by Victoria's story to start her own business. "Watching you rebuild your company and your life taught me that women can overcome any obstacle," Lisa had written. "You showed me that success comes from hard work, integrity, and refusing to let anyone else define your worth. Because of your example, I had the courage to leave my abusive marriage and start my own consulting firm." Victoria kept the letter as a reminder that her story had meaning beyond her own success. She had become an inspiration to other women who were facing their own challenges and betrayals. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Almost finished with the final blueprints for the community center. Can't wait to show you tonight. Love you. The community center was Daniel's latest project, a pro bono design for a non-profit organization that served underprivileged families. Victoria's company would be handling the construction, also at cost. It was one of many charitable projects they had undertaken together, using their success to give back to the community. Victoria walked to the window and looked down at the construction site where her crew was working on a new affordable housing development. These homes would provide quality housing for working families at prices they could afford. It was the kind of project that gave Victoria's work deeper meaning beyond profit and success. Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked on the door. "Mrs. Torres, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." Victoria was curious. She wasn't expecting any personal visitors, and most people made appointments through Jennifer. "Send her in." The woman who entered Victoria's office was thin, nervous, and vaguely familiar. She was well dressed but looked like she hadn't been sleeping well. It took Victoria a moment to recognize her. It was Natasha Rivers. Victoria felt her blood pressure spike. The woman who had helped destroy her marriage was standing in her office, looking desperate and defeated. Victoria's first instinct was to call security, but her curiosity overrode her anger. "What do you want?" Victoria asked coldly. Natasha looked around the luxurious office, taking in the awards, the photos, and the obvious signs of Victoria's success. Her expression was a mixture of regret and envy. "I wanted to apologize," Natasha said quietly. "I know it doesn't mean anything now, but I'm sorry for what I did to you." Victoria studied the woman who had helped Robert steal her money and nearly destroy her life. Natasha looked older than her years, worn down by prison and the consequences of her choices. "You're right," Victoria said. "It doesn't mean anything. Why are you here?" Natasha sat down without being invited, a sign of either desperation or continued arrogance. "I was released last month. Early parole for good behavior and cooperation with ongoing investigations." Victoria felt a flash of anger that Natasha had been released while Robert was still serving his full sentence. But then she realized it didn't matter. Natasha's early release didn't change anything about Victoria's life or success. "I can't find work," Natasha continued. "No one will hire me. My criminal record follows me everywhere. I've lost everything." Victoria felt no sympathy. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with the consequences." "I know," Natasha said. "I'm not asking for your help or your forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you won. You completely and totally won." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "I know I won. I didn't need you to tell me that." Natasha looked around the office again. "Robert used to talk about you all the time. Even when we were planning to steal from you, he couldn't stop talking about how smart you were, how successful you were, how much everyone respected you." Victoria was surprised by this revelation. Robert had never expressed such admiration for her during their marriage. "He was jealous of you," Natasha continued. "He knew he wasn't as talented or as smart as you were. The whole scheme was his way of trying to prove he was better than you." Victoria realized that Natasha was giving her insight into Robert's motivations that she had never understood. His betrayal hadn't just been about money or another woman. It had been about his own insecurity and jealousy. "But he was wrong," Natasha said. "You're everything he said you were and more. Look at what you've built. Look at what you've accomplished. Robert is rotting in prison and you're running an empire." Victoria stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "Is there a point to this visit?" Natasha stood up as well. "The point is that I wanted to see for myself what a real successful woman looks like. I wanted to understand what I threw away when I chose the easy path of crime over the hard path of building something legitimate." Natasha walked toward the door then turned back. "I also wanted you to know that Robert talks about you constantly in prison. He's obsessed with finding out how you're doing, whether you've remarried, whether the company is still successful. It's driving him crazy that he can't control or hurt you anymore." Victoria felt a cold satisfaction. Robert's punishment wasn't just imprisonment. It was knowing that she had succeeded beyond his wildest dreams while he had lost everything. "Goodbye, Natasha," Victoria said. "I hope you find a way to build an honest life." After Natasha left, Victoria sat alone in her office, processing the unexpected visit. She felt no anger or resentment, just a calm sense of closure. Seeing Natasha had reminded her of how far she had come and how completely she had triumphed over those who had tried to destroy her. Victoria's phone rang. It was Daniel, calling to confirm their dinner plans. "How was your day?" he asked. "Interesting," Victoria said. "I'll tell you about it tonight." Victoria gathered her things and prepared to leave the office. As she walked through the building, she nodded to employees who respected her leadership and appreciated her fair treatment. She passed conference rooms where her project managers were planning builds that would house families and serve communities. Outside, Victoria's driver was waiting with the car. She had hired a driver not out of pretension but out of practicality. Her time was valuable, and being driven allowed her to work during her commute. As the car pulled away from Torres Construction headquarters, Victoria looked back at the building that represented her triumph. She had built it with her own vision, her own money, and her own determination. No one could take credit for it except her. Victoria thought about the woman she had been 3 years ago, married to a man who was stealing from her while planning to destroy her life. That woman had been naive, trusting, and dependent on others for validation. The woman sitting in the car now was completely different. She was independent, successful, and in control of her own destiny. She had learned that the only person she could truly depend on was herself, and that lesson had made her stronger than she had ever imagined possible. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her sister Maria. Saw the article about the community center project. So proud of you. Victoria smiled. Her family had watched her transformation with amazement and pride. They had seen her at her lowest point and witnessed her incredible comeback. Their support had meant everything during the difficult times. The car pulled up to Daniel's architecture firm, where he was waiting with the blueprints for the community center. He climbed into the car with a roll of papers and a smile that made Victoria's heart skip. Ready to see what we're going to build together? Daniel asked. Victoria took his hand and squeezed it. I'm ready for anything we build together. As the car drove toward the restaurant where they would have dinner and plan their future, Victoria felt a sense of contentment that she had never experienced during her marriage to Robert. She had found real love, achieved genuine success, and built a life that was entirely her own creation. Victoria Torres had gotten her revenge, but more importantly she had gotten her life back. And her new life was better than anything she had lost. The story of her betrayal and triumph was complete. Victoria had been tested by the worst kind of betrayal and had emerged stronger, wiser, and more successful than ever. She had proven that she didn't need anyone else to validate her worth or enable her success. Victoria Torres was the architect of her own destiny, and her future was limitless.